After spending some time in Saint Denis, John wanted to get away. He'd been in the city for a while now and wanted to return to a simple life. He thought what better idea than to take a camping trip up north to go fishing. Before leaving on his trip though, John had to prepare. He headed to the nearby general store to stock up on goods for the trip. John also bought some canned food for an easy meal if he needed it. He also bought a lake fishing lure that he would use on his trip. After stocking up, he was ready to leave the city. He had a couple of stops he was going to make on his way up north. His first stop led him deep into the swamp. He'd be heading to one of the best underground fishing stores in the country. He was now in Le Gras. This was a settlement deep in the bayou. As he approached the bait shop, he hoped he would find something good. Unfortunately, he had already purchased the lake lure, so the only other one that would be worth his time was the river lure, just in case. He put the lure on his pole just to see how everything looked together, and then it was time to start the long journey ahead. This was going to be a 2-day horseback trip, so he had a town in mind that he would stop in for tonight. The nature and scenery around him slowly started to change as he made his way on his journey. He made sure to stop and care for his horse along the way, making sure he was feeling good. As the day went on, the sun started to go down as well. Just like that, John was almost at his second stop already. He would be stopping at Valentine and then camping around here for the night. John wouldn't be staying here very long, but he did have an idea. He'd always loved the saloon here, so of course he would be heading in. After traveling on his horse all day, it was nice to finally do something different and just relax. He had a couple beers at the bar, and by that time the sun was starting to set. He decided he would leave and go set up camp for the night. Valentine was always one of his favorite towns to visit, so he was glad he stopped. He wanted to set up camp at high ground, so he climbed up this mountain. At the top, he ended up finding a pretty good clearing that he could use as a campground. First thing, he made a fire, then put up his tent. He was pretty tired out from a day of traveling, so he decided to head to bed right away. It was now the morning, so John got up. He was happy to be away from the city. He had some of his canned food for breakfast, then chilled out by the fire for a tiny bit. He couldn't linger for too long though, because he wanted to get to his spot and also fish today. The ride wasn't too much further today, so he was excited to get going. He was heading to what he heard was a great fishing lake. If he caught any fish, he was for sure going to eat them too. This portion of the ride involved climbing up a pretty big mountain. Coming down the other side of the mountain, John hoped to see the lake soon. He was now nearly there and could almost see the water. And just like that, he got his first glimpse of the lake. He decided to go take a look at the lake a little bit closer. As John climbed up this rock, he saw an amazing scene. This lake was named O'Creagh's Run. John was super happy he made it, and he was excited to get the day started. First things first, John needed to find a good spot for his campsite. Well looking, he found another guy camping on the lake as well. He used his binoculars to check out his spot and see how it looked. Then he scanned the rest of the shoreline to see if he could find a good flat spot by the lake. Well looking, he found a perfect spot and decided to head to it. On his way to the spot, he passed by a cabin, and just like that, he had found a perfect flat spot by the water for his campsite. After examining the spot, he decided this was perfect and he was going to set up here. First, he got a fire going, and then he put up the tent. He now had his full campsite set up. He was ready to check out his potential fishing spots. Just a couple feet away, he noticed a perfect spot, and he already saw some fish in the water. He decided he was going to fish here first. He got his fishing pole out and was ready to get some casts going. As he got closer to the water, he could not wait to throw his new lure in. He made his very first cast of the trip. He was a little rusty. That was a terrible one. He reeled it back in and went for round 2, which ended up being a lot further and a perfect cast. It happened to be right over some fish, so he reeled this in, hoping for a bite. After only a couple seconds, he noticed a bite and hooked the fish. It was fish on. He now had to fight the fish and reel it in. This was only his second cast, and he already had something on the other end of his line. He knew this was going to be a golden fishing spot. Not to mention, this felt like a massive fish. It was not easy to reel in at all, and it had a ton of energy. As he continued to fight the fish and reel it in, it got closer and closer. The fish had one last fight in him though. He kept going. Eventually, the fish ran out of strength, and John reeled it in. He did it. He caught his first fish of the day, and it was nothing small. This was a 14-ounce sockeye salmon, perfect for eating. John kept the fish to cook and eat later. He was not done at all though, and threw in another cast. As he reeled this one in though, he didn't end up getting any bites. That's okay though, he told himself he's not going to get a bite every cast. He sent in another one hoping for better luck, and this time he received it as he hooked another fish right away. This one was definitely a little bit smaller as it was much easier to reel in. It barely put up any fight until the very end and got a last second burst of energy. John ended up reeling it in though shortly after that. This was a 5-pound sockeye salmon, a little bit smaller, and he already had one, so he threw it back. He noticed what looked like a musky close to shore, so he was determined to catch one of those today. John took another cast, hoping to catch a musky here. Once again, only a couple seconds later, he ended up hooking a fish, and this one felt massive. He could tell right away that this fish was going to put up a massive fight. Every time he'd get a little ground on the fish by reeling it in, it'd just go crazy again and have a ton of strength, reeling back out the line. John quickly realized this was going to take a while. He was determined though, he was going to catch this fish, no matter what it took. No matter how close John got the fish to shore, it would just end up having another burst of strength. Time after time, he'd get get so close yet so far because it would just go out again. This attempt, he was mere inches from getting the fish on shore, yet it had more strength and pulled out more line. John was starting to get super tired and almost wanted to give up here. It was these moments where the fish almost got to shore that he got the most angry. After many minutes of fighting this fish, John finally had the advantage and he ended up getting this onto shore. He had just caught a musky, the fish he was hoping to catch, and this was a massive one. He couldn't believe his eyes. He had just reeled in a 19-pound musky. This was by far his largest fish of the day and also largest of all time. He contemplated putting it back, but he decided to eat it ultimately because he'd never tried musky before. He brought the fish straight back to camp and decided to cook it up and eat it right away. Musky was supposedly a flaky type of meat, so he was excited to try it. It ended up tasting not too bad and he was pretty hungry, so he decided to have some more. After his lunch though, he knew he wanted to get back to fishing soon and catch some more species. This time he decided to try a slightly different spot. Also, he changed up his bait to some cheese to hopefully catch some new species. Making his first cast, he could see some fish out there again. He knew he was in a good spot. On his very first cast with the cheese, he ended up hooking a fish right away. This one was super easy to reel in compared to the last fish. It only took a couple of seconds. This was a 1-pound chain pickerel. He thought it looked a lot like a pike because apparently it is in the pike family. Since it was so small, he threw it back. He put cheese on his line again and opted for another cast. This time he decided to just let the cheese sit there and waited for a fish to come bite. Eventually one took the offer and now he had a fish on his line. This one felt a little bit bigger than the last one. Still, it was not very hard to reel in. This was a 1-pound rock bass, a new species for the day. Of course, John decided to throw it back in the water. After that fish, he walked back to camp and decided to take a little break from fishing to sit by the fire. After his little chill break, he decided to look a little bit more around the campsite. He ended up finding and picking this burdock root. After that, he decided to wade in the water a little bit. It was amazing how clear and fresh this water looked. He ended up walking on the sandbar type thing in the water, and then stood on this miniature almost island type feature. He decided this was the perfect spot to actually try some fishing. He was in the water already, so he'd be able to cast further into the lake. This time, he put worms on his line, so he let it sit there and waited for his bobber to go down. After a couple minutes waiting though, nothing bit, so he decided to try casting in a different direction. It seemed like no matter what he was doing, nothing wanted to bite the worms. So he tried one more cast in yet a different direction. Once again, just waiting, trying to get the worm to move a little bit. The sun was starting to set and the lake was getting super foggy. John patiently kept waiting though, and he was lucky he did because eventually he had another fish on his line. Patience was key for this last fish, and he's glad he ended up waiting. Even though this was a small pickerel again, he was glad he caught one last fish of the day. John walked out of the water and back to camp, where he was ready to cook that salmon he caught for dinner. He was happy he saved this for dinner because he liked it way more than the musky. After dinner, he just sat by the fire, just happy to be back in nature. He ended up catching a lot of fish today. He was very happy. The lake looked awesome as the sun started to set, a vibrant red. John left his campsite to go take a look at it. As he stood on top of this rock, he realized this was exactly the type of trip he needed. The sun was nearly almost set now as he walked back to camp. As he sat down one last time, he realized he was tired and went to bed. John woke up the next morning feeling great. For breakfast, he had his bread roll he bought, and just like that, it was time to take down the camp. He had a long ride home, so there was no time to waste. As he finished packing up completely, he hopped on his horse. He said goodbye to his spot, and thought to himself that he'd definitely be back here at some point. John started riding, happy with the thought he had a successful trip. This was exactly what he needed to get away from the big city. As he started his trip back, he couldn't wait to find out what his next adventure would be. John had been doing hard day after hard day of intense work at the ranch. It had been a while since he had his last vacation and break. He figured it was a great time to get away to avoid burnout. This time though, he wanted the ultimate luxury experience without having to travel much. Previously, he rated Saint Denis as his favorite place to stay, so he decided he'd head there. This time though, he wasn't going to worry about money. He was going to go all out and stay multiple days as well. To keep with the luxury mood, John started the first leg of the trip on a stagecoach, first stopping in Valentine to go to the train station where he would purchase a ticket straight to Saint Denis. He didn't want to do any of the traveling himself this trip. He had now arrived in Saint Denis on the train and had completed the journey there. He had a fairly nice seat on the train as well. He walked off and was now at his vacation. He watched as the train slowly left the station, and it was now time to start the adventure. First things first, he had to head into town to get to the nicer areas. Finally getting closer to the center of town and to where he wanted to be, he noticed a stray dog on one of the roads. Of course he had to say hi and give him a nice pat. The dog was super dirty, but that didn't stop John. He kept walking to a certain place he had planned, which was the barbershop to freshen up for his city life. He ended up getting a clean shave, and also the barber styled his hair with some pomade. He left happy with his new look and had even more planned in for trying to fit in. He saw a beggar on one of the roads. He remembered not everyone was fortunate like he was now, so he gave him some money. He continued his walk to the next location, which had him going through this nice park. This part of town was super nice. He was now at his next location, the clothes store. John was looking to spend some money on a nice fancy outfit for his vacation in town. He headed to the wardrobe to try on his new outfit, where he really started to look more fancy. He left the store feeling confident in his choices, and now looked like he belonged in the city. Now it was time to head to his hotel, where he had previously stayed last time. His favorite hotel was in the nicest saloon in town. Before checking in though, he had something more important to do. He headed up the nice staircase, and made his way to the bathroom, where he would get a much needed clean. He needed to refresh for the city life, as he was fully embracing this 5-star vacation. Next, he was very hungry, so he ordered some prime rib, which was very yummy, then washed that down with a shot of whiskey. Next, it was finally time to check into the hotel room, so he headed upstairs again, this time to the room though, and once again, he was amazed at how nice it was. He decided to chill out for a little bit, as he had a long day of travel. He went to go check out the balcony his room offered. As he saw the sun start to set a little bit, he loved watching the city below him from here. He was happy to be on his luxury vacation. He talked to a couple other people on the balcony, and noticed a trolley down below. Tomorrow he was gonna ride one. He was excited. It was really dark, so he headed back to his room, and after a long day of travel, he was tired, so he headed to bed. The next morning, John woke up nice and early. He walked to a trolley station, where he got on. These things were still so crazy to John. Completely new technology to him. Even though they were slow, this was a fun way to get around the city. This of course was a part of the 5-star experience. Eventually John got off where he wanted to be. He was gonna head to the town market. He wanted to check out what this place had to offer. He noticed a food stall, and he took a carrot. After checking out the market, John wanted to head to the general store. He was pretty hungry now, so he'd get some food. He ended up getting some fine brandy, and then he left. He ate his food, and then drank the brandy. After fueling up, John had something exciting planned. He was heading to the movie theater. He came here last time and really enjoyed it. He purchased a ticket for himself, then walked in not knowing what the movie was. He decided to opt for a higher balcony view for this movie this time, and he settled into his seat. However, he realized he could barely see anything from here, so he just decided to stand up instead. This was a new movie he had never seen before, thankfully. He was excited to see what it was. Honestly, standing up here by himself wasn't that bad, and overall, he enjoyed his time at the movies. He left the theater and was on to the next thing. He wanted to go check out the super nice neighborhoods in the city that had many mansions and awesome houses. He liked looking at these to see what his potential future could be. These truly were the best of the best that he could find. Some of these were super big and looked so nice. He shortly came up on one of the largest mansions in the entire city. This thing was truly massive. He admired it from afar. As he was talking to a rich local, he noticed a poster on the wall. It was an advertisement for a show at the theater. He decided he'd attend tomorrow. On his way back, he noticed another really nice park. He checked out some of the paths. He also noticed some guys playing dominoes. He went to go see if he could play with them, and thankfully they let him. He wasn't the most familiar with the game, but he was just happy to meet some people. He always felt kind of isolated at home. He was glad to get out into the public. After playing a bit, he decided to leave. He decided to stop and admire for a second just how nice this neighborhood was. With the leaves literally blowing in the air, it was perfect. It was time to head back to the hotel for dinner. He was pretty far and didn't want to walk, so he took the trolley again. It was super nice. The trolleys were free in Saint Denis. After not too long of a ride, it was time for his stop, and he got off. He was back at the saloon now, hungry for some dinner. He ordered the lobster bisque this time to switch things up, and it honestly was pretty good. After that, it was time to have a quick beer, as he slammed this one down. He had a show to go to tomorrow, so he only had one more. It was getting pretty late now too. He walked upstairs, went to his room, and since it was a little clearer tonight, he decided to go on the balcony again. Then he headed back inside, where he headed to bed. Once again, he woke up pretty early to not waste the day. He decided to change up his outfit for today for the show, and he headed out right away. Before the show though, he headed back to the clothes store because he had a specific hat in mind that he wanted to buy. After trying it on, he knew it was the right one. It was going to be a perfect look for the city. He left with a great outfit. Unfortunately, it was pretty rainy today though. The clothes store was very close to the theater though, because after only a short walk, he was there. He walked in and admired the awesome architecture of this building. This was clearly fitting of the 5-star luxury vacation he wanted. He went ahead and bought his ticket, which he splurged on an upper balcony private viewing. He walked into his seat, got situated, and waited for the show. Right away, a guy came out to introduce the acts. It felt like this guy just kept going on and on though. Thankfully, he finally left the stage, and the first act came out. It was a guy and a bunch of dancing girls. They were pretty good, but it wasn't the best thing ever. John still clapped along though, of course. They started to ramp up the show a little bit. This guy even pulled out a cartwheel, and then he did a crazy handstand, which John thought was impressive. Eventually, their act was done, and they left the stage. It was time for the next act. It was a girl with a snake. John was not expecting this one. He couldn't tell if it was real or fake, or at least dead. To be honest, this one was a lot more boring, so he was kinda glad when it was done. The next act was some sort of strong lady. She bent what looked like a metal rod over her knee. She got it completely in half. Next up, she ripped what looked like a book in half. Then she did a somersault onto this table. Then a second person came out and broke what looked like a brick right on top of her. This last one was his favorite by far. John got up and left the show. He enjoyed the performances more than he thought he would. He then left the theater ready for the next thing. He honestly wasn't quite sure what he'd do next. He remembered there was a self-portrait photographer here in the city, so he decided to head to it. On his way, he noticed a dead pig on the ground. This thing was nasty and rotten. It had been dead for a while, clearly. He then made it to the photographer and got ready to take his picture. He tried a couple different backgrounds, but ended up going with this one. He tried a couple poses as well, but went with this one. He wanted a fancy look, of course. He was happy with this photo to remember his trip, so he left the store. The cemetery was right across the street, so John decided to check it out for fun. For a cemetery, this was about as grand as it got. He saw one he wanted to try and go in. It was unlocked, and he saw a bunch of caskets in there. It was a little bit creepy, to be honest. He left and just looked around the whole cemetery. He found another cool looking one, and he tried going in another one, but it was locked. He called that good and left the cemetery. As he was leaving, he saw yet another dead animal. This time it was a horse. He really wondered what was going on the street. How was everything dead? He decided to walk back through some alleyways this time, which was honestly cool. It brought a whole nother light to the city. It had a whole different vibe back here. As he was walking through the alleys, he noticed a man running from a police officer. He decided to go take a look. He was kind of intrigued, to be honest. The police officer gave the man a hard hit, and it looked like he killed him. All of a sudden, he put him over his shoulder and just walked away with him. John decided to mind his own business though. After that, he decided to leave the alleyways. He headed to the market once again to get a better look this time. This time he went to the trapper to see what he had to offer. He had a bunch of cool outfits, hats, everything like that. Too bad John didn't have any pelts. He was definitely going to come back here at some point though. He looked at the rest of the stalls and then made it out the back entrance. After that, he figured it was time to head back to the hotel, this time taking a nice run back instead of the trolley, which he got there in pretty good time. He wanted to take it easy the rest of the day until night, so he just went to go chill on his bed. Since it was the last night he was going to be here, he decided he would go crazy at the bar tonight. It was time for his first beer, then his second, then his third, then his fourth, then his fifth. It was after his fifth he finally started to notice an effect. He was now a little bit tipsy, but of course he had to keep going. He had his sixth, seventh, and even eighth. By now, he was so gone. His judgment was completely down the drain, so he kept going. He had his 9th, then 10th, and even 11th, where at this point he genuinely couldn't even tell what was going on. Everything was so distorted. He finally stood up from the bar, but then, dark. He woke up the next day very confused, feeling not great. He was on some random street, not in his hotel room. He must have blacked out last night. Having no clue what happened, he just stood there for a while. Hopefully he didn't do anything stupid. This was a good call for John to end the trip here. He realized he went way too far last night. After shaking off last night, John headed back to the hotel to take a quick nap before leaving. He was still feeling very rough, so this was much needed for him to recover. During his sleep, John dreamed about his trip. This truly was a 5-star vacation. Spending 3 nights in Saint Denis, John experienced it all. He started on a stagecoach, then moved to a train, where he finally made it to the station, first getting cleaned up at the barbershop, to then getting a fancy outfit, getting some good food at the hotel, then checking in. John later went to the movies that day, having a great view, then going to a great show the next day with various acts of all kinds, to then just exploring the town. This was overall just a great trip for John. The last night, he went a little crazy, but that didn't mean anything. It was still a great trip. John woke up from his nap, catching up on some sleep, to then having to leave the town. He headed to the train station, hopped on the train, and that was it. His vacation was over. Meet John and Michael, both very different men in very different times. They have their differences, but deep down, they are very similar. Both are family men, both are trying to be a better father, both coming from a troubled past of former robbery, and both trying to live normal lives now. One of the biggest differences is their day-to-day life. From being a rancher in the countryside to being a rich man in a big city, they are extremely opposite. Michael woke up like any other day, being able to sleep in like usual. He walked to his massive wardrobe and put on his clothes for the day. He could pretty much afford any clothes he wanted. John woke up bright and early and said good morning to Abigail before starting a hard day of work. First things first, he went to go prepare some breakfast. He needed to fuel up for his long day of ranch work. Michael started his day off checking on his son. Of course he ignored him playing his video games. Then he went into his daughter's room. She was gone though, who knows where she was. After that, he went downstairs, said hi to his wife, then decided to go chill on his couch. He had nowhere to be for a while, so he decided to have a smoke. Then of course after, he had to watch some TV. After John ate his breakfast, he did his daily shave, and then was off to work. John now owned and ran his very own ranch. He had a lot on his daily schedule, so he decided to get to work right away. First thing up was heading into the barn. First on his checklist was cleaning up the stalls. He always hated this part since it was kinda gross, but it was necessary, so he always had to do it. Soon he was gonna make Jack do it. After TV, Michael decided it was time for some breakfast. His wife was making him be more healthy lately, so he always had to start his mornings with these gross green drinks. And yet another requirement of hers was he had to do daily morning yoga. To be completely honest though, he enjoyed this a little bit more than he let on. After scraping up all of the stalls, John was finally done with his first chore of the day. He put his pitchfork back and was ready for the next one. For his next chore, he milked the cow, then he left the barn and decided to check on his horses. He had just recently picked these ones up and tamed them, so of course he needed to make sure they were well taken care of. After that, he took a break to go check in with his family. He found Jack reading his book, of course, and he had a brief conversation with them. Michael started his yoga routine. He was kind of glad he listened to his wife on this one. Every day he got more and more into it, and he got more and more flexible. He started to get to the point where he could commit to crazy positions. After that one, he called it good for his daily yoga. John immediately started his next chore. He had to transport these hay bales to various locations around the ranch. This one was for feeding in the barn. He placed it down in its spot and was ready for the next task. He was shocked to find Uncle actually doing some work. He had to ask him about this, make sure he wasn't dreaming. After Michael's relaxed morning, it was time for him to go to work. He still couldn't believe what his son had done to the car. He thought the wheels were terrible. His commute to work was pretty nice, and he had a great flexible schedule. Traffic was not terrible for him today, as he was able to miss the morning rush. John's next job was to pump water out of the well. This was for sure one of the easier tasks he had to do. This water was going to be for the animals, but first his dog said hi, of course. He carried the water over to where he needed to bring it and poured it in the trough for the animals to drink out of it. Michael was now a film producer. This was his absolute dream job. Every day he pulled up to work, he still couldn't believe it. He was starting work on his very next movie today. He was finally a lead producer. Of course, he had to stop and get a donut before work. After that, it was time for him to head in the office and finally start his workday. John started his next chore, which was bringing food to the chickens. He hoped Jack would be able to help him with some of these chores soon. He finally made it to the chicken coop and he picked up a bucket of food. He honestly loved having chickens, just for companions and of course the eggs. He made sure the chickens had a good amount of food and was now done with this chore. He noticed one of the chickens on the loose though. After getting everything back in order, he collected their eggs, and now he had to bring them all to the wagon. Once he had enough built up, he would take these into town and various places to go sell them. After that chore, it was time for one of his favorites, chopping the firewood. This was honestly so fun to him and a great way to relieve stress. He got pretty good at it too and could almost always get him on the first try. He chopped wood after wood after wood, and then finally finished it all. He looked at his hard work and was now done with this chore. Michael finally finished work. It was a solid productive day of working on the movie. It was currently in the storyboard process. Michael had some plans for after work. He was not going to go home straight away. Sometimes he needed to be away from the family. He came up on a crazy traffic jam though. There seemed to be some sort of roadblock and this car was just not moving. He was super confused and just decided to wait it out. Eventually his light turned green though, and there was a ton of cars in the middle of the intersection. He did not feel like waiting anymore, so he decided to make his way around them carefully. Michael continued his drive to the location and everything was smooth from here. John decided it was time for a break and headed inside. He then grabbed a bottle of brandy, then had some lunch. To avoid burnout, he always let himself take a break. He decided to have a cigarette because why not? It was his break time. After that, he found Uncle still in his pajamas going to chill by the fire. He decided he'd sit with him for a little bit. They chatted for a couple minutes, then John had to get back to doing stuff. Michael had just recently become a member of the country club and was getting pretty into golf. Before he went home, he was going to play some. This was the best course and country club in Los Santos. He couldn't wait to play again. Of course, he changed into proper clothing and got in his golf cart, and he was off to his first tee. John was heading into town to Blackwater on his horse as he left his ranch. Thankfully, Blackwater was super close and was the nearest town. After only a couple minutes of riding, he had now made it to the town. Blackwater was a fairly nice and upcoming city, and John had a couple of things he needed to do here today. Michael made it to the first tee on the course and was ready to hit this first ball. This first hole was a straight line away from him, and he was ready to make his first swing. He wound back and hit the ball. It wasn't his best hit, but it was his first one. He picked up where the ball landed and made his next swing and hit. This one was a lot better, had a lot more strength to it, making it closer to the hole. Now time for his third hit. He swung back and chipped this one as he was a lot closer to the hole. On this next one, he accidentally hit it into the sand trap, but on the next one, he ended up getting it super close to the hole. Finally, he could just put it in, and that was a bogey. Not terrible for his first hole. Abigail sent John to Blackwater to get groceries and dinner for tonight. He headed to the general store. He got some fresh produce, including some fruits, and then also purchased some items from the catalog. After getting beef and rolls, he got a couple other items and called it good. After getting all he needed, he left the store. He saw a newspaper boy across the street, so he decided to go check one out and buy one. He liked to keep up with current events, and it had been a while since he had purchased the newspaper. He read up on everything new and made sure to get his money's worth, reading every single article. After that, John got back on his horse and headed back home. Michael continued to play his round of golf and continued to make questionable hits, specifically into trees. He finally got a perfect hit on this next one, and this putt was so close it just bounced right out. He was so mad. He finally finished it off there for another bogey. As that was the story for the rest of the holes, he was now done. It was now time for Michael to finally head home as he started his drive back. John arrived back home to the ranch. After a successful errand run, he put all of the food he got into the kitchen, but he still had a couple of things to do before he ended his workday. He milked the cow one last time, and now that he had enough milk, he could load it into the wagon. He picked up the first milk jug and made his way over to place it into the wagon. He grabbed the second one and put it right next to the other one. Michael eventually made it back home to his house, and for once actually parked his car into his garage. He saw his wife drinking that nasty green drink, which inspired him to have some whiskey. He poured up a glass for himself and downed it in one gulp. Of course he had to have another. One was not enough. Surprisingly though, he called it good at just 2 because he promised his wife he'd meet her down at the tennis court. John was now done with ranch work for the day, so he decided to chill out and wait for dinner. Abigail thankfully made some dinner and it was time to eat. He was very hungry after a long day's work. He was happy to have the full family at the dinner table, even Uncle. Abigail was super good at cooking, so he ate it all up, then just chatted with his family at the table. Michael was ready to play some tennis. He and his wife had been getting more into it. Michael made the first serve of the game, and he started off with a good hit right back. He ended up scoring the first point as well. These games got super competitive between the two. It wasn't all good though, as his wife scored the next one. She made sure to rub it into him. Eventually, Amanda found herself almost winning the game, which she ended up doing. Michael was pretty mad, but he wasn't gonna go for that one. After dinner, John headed outside of the house to his brand new gazebo that he had built. He still hadn't built any furniture yet though, so it was just crates. He decided to chill here for a bit though. After that, he went to go talk to Abigail, and for some reason, she was pretty angry at him. He wasn't quite sure what he did. He decided to defuse the situation by leaving, and he headed to the fire. Michael and Amanda ended up playing a couple more games where they never ended up going very well for him. He decided to quit. He was finally in his comfortable clothes as well. He saw a very nice sunset, which made him actually admire the city for once, finally utilizing his balcony. His last plan for the night was hopping into the pool, almost hitting his head there. After a nice relaxing swim, Michael decided to hop into the hot tub. He finally realized this was the life. He didn't need crime anymore. This was perfect the way it was. It was now getting pretty dark for John sitting by the fire. He also noticed a storm brewing in the distance. He decided it was time to head in. He had a brief chat with Uncle, then headed into the house. Here he found Abigail and Jack chilling together in the living room. He sat down to listen to Jack read his book. He realized it was nice to see him so passionate about something, even if he didn't always approve. After the hot tub, Michael walked back inside, where he hopped onto the couch, had one last smoke before bed, and then turned on the TV to relax. After that, he decided to head up. Before heading to bed, he wanted to see if his kids were still home. He checked his son's room to see him gone, surprisingly not playing video games. He noticed the bong on his floor. He said, "Screw it, he's not here. I might as well take a hit of this thing." He didn't want him using it anyways. This was his way of confiscating it. He immediately felt the effects kick in. He wondered if this stuff was laced or something. He took that as his cue to head to bed, and so did John. Both of them headed to bed, having very different days. John faced a harsh, full workday of physical labor tasks, where Michael enjoyed an easy morning on a flexible office work schedule. This isn't to say that Michael had it easy. He worked very hard to be in his position now, and so did John. To them now, these were the lives they vowed to live. While both men lived very different lives, they had a strangely close connection. To them now, it was about fitting in. No more crazy lives. It was all about blending in. John was currently staying in the town of Strawberry. He had big plans for his next adventure though. Strawberry was just a mere part of this journey. The first step of this adventure took place in the general store. It was necessary that John stocked up on the proper goods and foods that he needed to survive. He bought various canned foods for convenience and ease of eating. He even decided to buy a new warm coat. He was now fully stocked up on everything he would need. He was currently staying in the Welcome Center hotel room, so for the rest of the day, he decided to take it chill and hang out on his amazing balcony. The sun started to fall as John looked down at Strawberry, and he went to bed for an early start tomorrow. Upon waking up, John immediately had to start preparing. He put his warmest clothes on and Arthur's old hat. He checked out his outfit in the mirror. Everything looked good and he was ready to go. John wasted no time leaving Strawberry and was out on his adventure. He was on his way to Mount Hagen, crossing multiple cool bridges on his way. John could feel the climate around him starting to change. As he crept closer, the air got colder and colder, and the air became thinner, until he finally saw his first signs of snow. It had been a long time since John had last seen snow, so he was glad to be back. Soon enough, he creeped up on his starting location, he left his horse, and he officially started his climb. John realized early on how steep this would really be, as he was still just at the very bottom. He kept moving at a very good pace though. He had been physically training for this for a while. Of course though, his body caught up to him, so he had to slow down the pace drastically. The steepness really started to tick up though as John made his first slide of the mountain. As John stopped to look at where he was walking, he realized he needed a different route. To the left was a much less steeper option. That helps John to realize instead of going straight up the mountain, he could go sideways and zigzag his way up. He continued to push himself through harder and harder terrain. From here on out, it was going to be really intense though. John found another steep part and made his second slide of the mountain, now covered in snow. After taking a breather from that last one, he kept going. He was very happy he got this new winter jacket. It had been a couple hours of climbing now, and John was looking for a break. He finally looked down and see how far he'd climbed. This is when the steepness really set in. He continued to trek forward, hopefully looking for a good spot to take a break, and right after this steep part, he found a semi-flat area that was pretty good for a break. John took a moment to just reflect how far he'd come. He was super happy he was on the mountain. John ate some of his canned food, and then continued his summit to the top. He found that remaining low helped him counter the steepness of the mountain. This would be his new strategy for now. After a couple more hours of climbing, John stumbled on what looked like a camp. It looked pretty abandoned, so John decided to check it out. He saw one of the fires was still going, so he used this as a chance to warm up a little bit. This was the perfect time to regain some energy and get his body heat back to normal. After taking a little break, John finally looked around at his surroundings. And just like that, he saw the peak. He didn't realize how close he was because he was so focused on this camp setup. Before making the final push to the summit though, John decided to have some food to fuel back up. John was now ready for the final push. In only a couple of minutes, he would be at the very top of this mountain. He could not believe he pushed himself all the way up here, and he only had a couple feet left to go. And just like that, John made it. As he made his first step to the top, he felt a sense of accomplishment. The view at the top was amazing. He could see for miles. John couldn't help but just stand there for a while. All around him looked amazing. All his work paid off for a successful climb. He decided to use his binoculars. He swore he caught a glimpse of Blackwater from here, and somewhere down there was the town Strawberry where he had came from. John finally decided he had enough time at the summit and made his way down. Not paying attention, he made a wrong step and accidentally fell down a major part of the peak. He sure was lucky there was a lot of snow. He made it back to this camp and decided soon he should set up his own. Further down the mountain, John found a good spot and set up his camp. He would be staying here for the night. He had more of his canned food for dinner, except that was not enough. After a full day of hiking, he needed to get some more food. He decided to head down to this lake below him. He still had a surprising amount of energy for just climbing a mountain. He realized there was a lot of ice on this lake. He was going to have to jump onto the ice and find a better spot. The ice was not easy to walk on. It was definitely very slippery. He needed to look for a proper opening in the water to go fishing. Before he did that though, he wanted to have some fun. Feeling like a kid again, he ran across the ice and slid. Honestly, this was the most fun he had today and in a long time. After having his fun, John realized he actually had to catch some dinner before it got too late. He put a lake lure on his fishing pole that was very successful in his last trip, and he made his first cast into the water. After a couple seconds reeling in, he noticed a bite and set the hook. It was fish on. Right away, he could tell this was a beast of a fish. It kept taking out more and more line. No matter how much John reeled in, it just kept reeling back out the same line. At this point, he had no clue what type of fish it was either. He didn't know if he would want to eat it yet. The fish slowly started getting closer and closer to shore, and it seemed like the fish was running out of energy. Unfortunately, only inches from shore, the fish had a last-second burst of energy, leaving John still fighting the fish. Thankfully, only a minute later, John actually had the fish's time, and he brought it onto the ice. This was a giant musky. John had previously caught one of these and ate it for the first time on his last fishing adventure. This one felt about the same size. It was a little bit smaller though. To be honest, John wasn't a huge fan of the taste of musky, but he kept this one. He put in all the work, he was not going to let it go. It was not easy carrying this giant fish back to camp in the deep snow, and the tiredness was starting to set in for John. John finally lugged this giant thing back to camp. He was ready to fillet this thing and get it cooking on the fire. He prepared the fish right away and got right to cooking it over the fire. Musky was a flaky type of meat, so it wasn't his favorite, but in the moment he was super hungry, so it was not bad. As John chilled by the fire, the sun started to set and the night came. Today was a very successful day, all around just a great trip. John decided to call it a day and headed to bed. He woke up pretty tired and sore from the climb the day before. He surprisingly stayed pretty warm last night for sleeping in the snow. For breakfast, he had his canned baked beans. Then he decided it was time to get going again soon. He packed up all of his belongings and camp and said goodbye to his awesome campsite. He mounted his horse and rode off into the snow. His horse was surprisingly capable in these conditions. He made his way up and around the mountain as it started to snow a lot more intensely. His ability was depleting, so he wanted to get off the mountain. Eventually he came up on his initial starting spot, which meant he was officially on regular ground now. As John rode away from the mountain, he reflected on his adventure. Starting in Strawberry, a good base point, he gathered all of the materials he needed. He also stayed in a nice hotel room with a great view. This was a great start to the trip. Next, John took a very scenic horse ride through changing scenery to the mountain. He crossed through rivers, bridges, and all various types of terrain. Then he arrived at the mountain, started climbing, realized the crazy steepness, made a couple stumbles, took some breaks, found a camp, and then reached the top. He then looked at the vast scenery around him and realized this is what he wanted to do. After that, he set up his camp, found a lake, had some fun slipping and sliding on the ice, casted his fishing pole, hooked a huge fish, reeled in the big musky, carried it back, and then ate it for dinner. He then went to bed in a great campsite. John wanted to give this trip a rating. He decided he would rate it on 3 main categories: enjoyment, scenery, and adventure. For the enjoyment category, John rated it a 6 out of 10. It was a good trip, but there was also things that could have gone a little bit better. For scenery, he gave it a 9.5 out of 10. It was a nearly perfect setting. It was super amazing. For the overall adventure, he gave it a 9 out of 10. There was a great challenge to this trip, and he ended up doing more things than he thought he would. As John finished reflecting on his trip, he totaled up the score. This trip scored 24.5 out of 30. John was finally out of the snow now and made it to Greenlands. He had a long trip ahead of him to get back home, but he couldn't wait to tell Jack, Abigail, and even Uncle about his trip. John was finally back at his ranch now, back to work of course, but in the back of his mind he wondered what his John's had a rough couple of years. He's finally settled down with his family in his new ranch, but he works every day non-stop and he's getting really tired. He finally decided it's time for a much-deserved break. Today, John is going to every town in Red Dead Redemption 2 on a vacation. John decided what better place to start his vacation than Valentine. As he first rode into town, he remembered all of the past events that once took place here. That life was past him now, so he was excited to take a nice vacation here. It was already getting late when he arrived, so the first thing he decided to do was check into a hotel. Once checked in, he decided to check out his room before he tried anything else in town. The room was nothing special, but it had a bed, and that's all John needed to get through the night. Valentine was known for having one of the best saloons in the country, so first things first, he wanted to check that out. As soon as he walked through the doors of the saloon, he could feel the good vibes. Clearly, this was the most popular place in town. He decided to start off the night with 1 beer, and honestly, it was a pretty good deal. As he was taking his very first sip, he noticed everyone was starting to run out of the saloon. Since he was no longer about that life, he decided to exit calmly and not get into any conflicts. It was great that Valentine happened to have another saloon, a lesser known option. John wanted an excuse to get out of the rain, so this was a perfect spot. When he walked in, he noticed the more calm, cozy feel to this saloon. He figured this was a good spot to get some dinner. The only thing on the menu though was oatmeal, so he ended up going with that. It was pretty good, and he was ready for the next thing. He decided to go for a shot of whiskey to switch things up for the last drink of the night. After this, it was getting late though, and the rain showed no signs of stopping. He decided to call it a night and head back to the hotel. Back in the hotel room, it was time for bed. He had a good idea for tomorrow morning before he left Valentine. One last thing to do before he left. Before that activity though, he needed some breakfast as he woke up pretty hungry. This morning, he decided to check out the general store instead of the saloon because he wanted to see if they had any good local food. Ultimately, he ended up going for a simple bread roll that was made in the store for a nice and easy breakfast. Now it was time for the cool thing he had planned for today. As he was coming in yesterday on his horse, he noticed a temporary tent set up. One of those tents happened to have a movie playing inside of it, and he was gonna go check it out. He had made it just in time for the start of the moving picture. To John, these were still crazy to watch. He would never be used to this. After the movie, it was time to head to the next town. John decided he would splurge on a train ticket this time. On his train ride to the next town, John decided to do some reflecting on Valentine. He rated the hotel a solid 6.5 out of 10. He rated the things to do category a 7.5 out of 10. The overall niceness town rating was a 7 out of 10, leaving a total of 21 out of 30 for Valentine. The next town on John's list was Annisburg, and to be completely honest, he was not very excited. Annisburg is primarily a mining town with little to no tourism. The only thing John knew he could do right away was get a hotel room. This hotel room was a clear downgrade from Valentine. However, it still wasn't the worst thing in the world. John was fine with it. Not knowing what to do, John climbed to a vantage point in the town and looked at his surroundings below him. One perk about Annisburg is the fact it's right on the water. He noticed a dock down below. With nothing else to do, he decided he would go check it out and head down the stairs. His goal was to look for a boat that he could borrow and explore the water area. Unfortunately, he couldn't find any, so he decided he would try some fishing. However, John completely forgot to pack any bait, so he couldn't go fishing. He decided he might as well try and swim. As he got in the water, he didn't realize how tired he was, and just like that, he was in a near drowning situation. Thankfully, he stood up and he was fine. That was a close one. This was John's sign to head around town, see if he could get any food before getting an early bedtime in. John learned quick that there was basically nothing to do here. Nothing was open for him. There was one thing that he could do though that sounded pretty appealing right now. It was now raining and he was gonna get a bath. This was the perfect time to take one. After his bath, he realized he had enough of this town and headed to bed. The next morning, it was time for John to head to his next location. However, this time he was going to travel there on horseback. Once again, on his way to the new town, he reflected on Annisburg. For his stay in the hotel, he rated it a solid 4.5 out of 10. Not perfect, but not the worst. For the things to do in Annisburg, he gave that a 3 out of 10, due to his primary purpose being a mining town. And the overall niceness town rating, he gave it a 3 out of 10. This gives Annisburg an overall score of 10.5 out of 30. Just as John finished reflecting on Annisburg, he came up on his next town, and this one he feared would be even worse. Meet Van Horn, the almost abandoned trading post. This town certainly has seen better days, but John knows he wants to visit every town to make it worth his time. Like usual, the first thing he did when visiting a new town was check into the local hotel. The room was in a pretty cool location, but the inside conditions were by far the worst that John had seen so far. To be honest, the room looked pretty trash from the last person that stayed here, clearly. Thankfully though, this town had an open saloon unlike the last one. John decided to go check it out. He wasn't in the mood for any drinks, so he just decided to look around the saloon. This one looked very barren and empty compared to the ones in Valentine. To be completely honest, after that, there's not that much to do in this town, but John had a really good idea. There is a lighthouse here in Van Horn, and John wanted to climb to the top. After a lot of stairs and one more ladder, he was now at the top. What he saw was a great view of the town. Even though this was a rundown place, it still had a special charm to it, and he enjoyed being up here. Without that much to do, John spent the rest of the day talking with the locals, just chilling around his hotel room, and had a quick dinner by the water. As the sun set, he got more and more excited for where he was heading tomorrow. Just before bed though, he decided to chill by the fire for a little bit to warm up, and then he went to sleep. Excited for the trip ahead, he left right away in the morning. Saying goodbye to Van Horn wasn't that hard, but it also was better than he thought. Today, he was heading down south for his next town. Once again on his journey, he had time to reflect on where he had just stayed. The hotel room there was definitely pretty weak. John gave it a 3 out of 10. For things to do, there was actually more than he thought. He gave it a 4 out of 10. The overall niceness town rating, obviously he's gonna give that a 2 out of 10. This brings the total for Van Horn 9 out of 30. His journey to the next town was really cool, crossing lots of bridges and going over lots of wetlands. Civilization started to creep up as he could tell he was getting closer to the main city. He was now in Saint Denis. After entering the large city, it was still raining, so he decided he was going to find his hotel room again, like usual. This time, his hotel room was located in one of the nicest saloons in the city. After walking up a grand fancy staircase he was not used to, it was time to check out his room. He couldn't believe how nice it was. This was a million times better than what he had stayed in the previous 2 nights. He couldn't believe he could afford this place. There was going to be so much to do in the city, and he had a full day ahead of him. First things first though, he wanted to freshen up. Heading to the barber shop was his first goal, to shave off his beard. After the barber was done, he was ready to start his day. The first thing on his list that he really wanted to try was the trolley cars. This was new technology he was not used to. Next on his list was checking out the theater to see a live show. Walking in, he couldn't believe how nice this place was. John decided to splurge a little bit on his ticket and ordered a private viewing in the balcony. The show ended up being pretty cool. John clapped along like he belonged. He still felt like this wasn't his style though, so he decided to leave the show early. Right across the street was a spot where people played dice. Unfortunately, no one wanted to play with him though. Next on his list was a movie. He felt like this was more his style, and he was excited. He decided to go in blind to the movie, not knowing what the film would be. The film was called The Farmer's Daughter, and he honestly thought this one was pretty funny. On his way out from the movie, the worst turn of events happened. John accidentally ran into a lady on his way out. He couldn't even see her, and by that point, it was too late. He was now wanted for disturbing the peace. As fast as he could, he ran away and decided to lay low until things cooled down. Since it was completely accidental, but he didn't have time to explain himself, John just decided to pay off his bounty and call it a day. He was pretty hungry after all that running and wanted a quick snack that he could use for lunch. He decided to head to the general store. He decided to go for a block of cheese, a nice easy meal. After that, he wanted to check out the city's saloon scene. He found one more his style, less fancy, nothing crazy, just what he liked. It was still a little bit too early, he felt. He didn't want to have any drinks yet, so he just looked around. Definitely not the busiest place, but it was cool. After a good day so far, he decided to head back to his saloon. This time, he opted for a real meal, and for dinner, he ordered some prime rib. Of course, he couldn't go today in this nice saloon without having a shot of whiskey. The rest of the day, he enjoyed his time at the saloon, but now it was bedtime. Before bed though, he wanted to check out the balcony that came with his hotel room. As he walked out onto the balcony, he couldn't help but realize how nice the city was. He used to hate the city, but now that he actually was vacationing in it, he enjoyed it. He had one more thing planned for tomorrow morning before he left the city, but overall this was a great day. The next morning right away, John went to his next activity, which was getting a custom portrait photo taken of himself. He tried a ton of different poses, backgrounds, everything. Finally, he settled on one he liked and took the photo. Now he was done with the photo, he was ready to leave Saint Denis. He was not quite used to cities yet, but his time here was well spent. The next town on his journey was easily accessible by horse. So once again, his journey gave him time to reflect. How did he like Saint Denis? His hotel was truly the pinnacle of luxury. He gave it 9.5 out of 10. There was an endless amount of things to do in the city, easily a 10 out of 10. He didn't even get to everything. The overall niceness town rating was an 8 out of 10. The city has its nice parts, and obviously the lesser nice parts, but overall, a solid city. That brings the total for Saint Denis 27.5 out of 30. As the scenery started to change around him, he knew he was coming up on his location. This upcoming town was small, but it had a lot of life. Welcome to the town of Rhodes. John had now made it to his next location, and it couldn't be any different in size compared to the last city he was at. Like usual, he decided to get his hotel situation under control first. Rhodes has one of the nicest saloons in all of the country, and it always has been one of John's favorites. He was more than happy to be back and would definitely be utilizing the bar later. First though, he found his room, and it honestly wasn't anything special, but it did the job. It definitely had a much smaller bed, but that was no problem for John since he was alone. After checking out his room, he realized he was really hungry. He had no breakfast this morning, so he decided to head to the general store. John decided on some corned beef and a peach. After eating his food, he was ready to explore the town a little bit. He'd heard good things about this gun store, so he decided to check it out for himself. He didn't end up buying anything new though. He told himself he didn't need any more guns. He'd always wanted to check out this wood mill, so he asked a couple guys if he could take a look, and they said yes. It was cool to see how everything worked up close, and he liked seeing the engine that powered it all. There's honestly never been a whole ton to do here, so John just spent a couple hours talking to some people here, asking them if they liked living here. He was still pretty hungry, so he decided to head back to the saloon for some food. He ordered cracked wheat and milk, and despite what it looked like, it actually tasted not too bad. He decided to have a beer too, cause why not? With not much left to do until night, also being tired from the trip, he decided to take a nap. John decided he was finally going to go all in at the bar tonight. He decided to wait though after his nap up on the roof. Once it got dark, John headed to the bar and had a ton of whiskey shots. He had the bartender keep them coming. Eventually he started to get a little bit tipsy and he decided to only have one more. At this point he was definitely gone. He was able to keep it together though and made it upstairs. He ended up making a guy a little bit mad. Thankfully he diffused the situation. After that he figured he had his fun and it was time for bed. Rhodes didn't have too much to offer, but he had a good day. He awoke ready to continue his journey. The saloon was surprisingly busy this morning. John noticed the guy in front of him was a little bit drunk. Instead of taking a horse today, he'd be taking the train. After purchasing his train ticket, John was ready for the next location. A decent distance by train meant he had time to reflect and think of his time in Rhodes. The hotel room in Rhodes was very average. John gave it a 5 out of 10. There honestly wasn't that much to do in Rhodes. The saloon really kicked up his score though, so we gave him a 4.5 out of 10. The overall niceness town rating was a solid 7 out of 10. Rhodes has always been a very nice and clean town. The total score for Rhodes is 16.5 out of 30. Just in time, John's train stopped at Riggs Station where he needed to be. This was his stop, but it was not the end of his journey to the next town. The next leg of this journey involved a quick horse ride. All of a sudden, John was now in the next town, Strawberry. Strawberry was a beautiful little town. Just like the last, it wasn't big, but it had a lot of character. As you know by now, John headed to the hotel where he would be staying. His room was located in the Welcome Center. When John walked into the room, he was amazed at how large and nice it was. John then realized that his room came with the best balcony view in the whole town. Right across the street from the hotel was the general store. John decided to go get some food. He felt like buying a carrot today and some canned peaches. Strawberry was a great scenic town for walking around, so it was time to do that. John met a fisherman and asked him if he had caught anything. Apparently Strawberry was famous for this guy playing 5-finger fillet, so John decided to challenge him. He decided to get a couple practice rounds in before actually challenging him. Eventually, he got the hang of it and started going super fast. It was now time to put some actual money on the line. John's opponent was pretty good, but he knew he could beat him. It was now John's turn to go, and oops, he accidentally hit himself, but don't worry, he decided to lock in, and look at how fast he went. John ended up taking the victory in a solid performance. After the 5-finger fillet, he decided to chill it out a bit. Good thing there was an outhouse here, because he had to go to the bathroom. Like usual, John liked to talk to the residents of the communities he was visiting. He even decided to listen to the local reverend and his sermon. Probably the coolest part about Strawberry though is the various bridges over this river. John's curiosity peaked when he noticed this ladder. He wanted to climb it to find out what it went to. What he found at the top was this empty water aqueduct. It looked like it took the water from up there and into the river. Being dumb, John decided to have some fun and he followed this thing to the end. Continuing to make poor choices, John thought it would be fun to jump off of here into the river. He severely miscalculated his jump and hit a rock, almost drowning in the river. Thankfully, he was able to grab onto a nearby rock and safely gather himself out of the river. John decided that was his cue to play it easy the rest of the day. He headed back to the welcome center. He decided to partake in one last adventure of the day though. He headed over to the jail right next door. After speaking with the sheriff, he gave him permission to go down and check out the jail cells. John said hi to the 2 prisoners in the jail cell and thanked himself and his brain for never ending up in this situation. For real this time, John went back to his hotel and decided to spend the rest of his day on the balcony watching the town go by beneath. Since there was no saloon in this town, he decided to call it a day and head to bed. The next morning, John said goodbye to the Welcome Center and Strawberry as he started his trek to the next town. Looking back on Strawberry, John really liked this town. He rated the hotel 8.5 out of 10 due to its great view and great room. There was no saloon, less things to do in this town, so he gave things to do 5 out of 10. The overall town niceness rating was an 8 out of 10, leaving a total of 21.5 out of 30. His horse ride to the next town was very cool. He ended up riding through a river. Just like that, he was now back into dry fields, coming up on the very next town. This one though was very familiar to him. He had recently purchased and rebuilt a ranch right next to Blackwater, so this was his hometown. Blackwater was another up-and-coming big city, and it had a lot of promise to it. Obviously, John was on vacation now though, so instead of staying in his ranch, he wanted to check out the hotel in the saloon. He was very impressed with the hotel room. It looked very fancy and nice. The first thing John did was head downstairs and have some peach cobbler. After his food, it was time to hit the town. Blackwater had its very own movie theater, so John wanted to see what was playing. He was disappointed though when he realized it was the same movie he had just watched when he was in Saint Denis. He didn't stay to watch the whole thing, but he made sure to say hi to the dog on the way out. He ended up asking a local what his favorite part of the town was, and he recommended he checked out the pier. He realized he had never actually walked out here, so he was excited to try it out. He realized there was a great view of Blackwater from this pier. Looking at Blackwater from the perspective of a tourist made him realize he was happy he moved here. He was for sure going to take his wife here. He went to the ticket office to see if there was any tickets available for the ferry boat, but everything was closed. He asked some other locals what their favorite things to do. They actually recommended him to go onto the tops of the roofs. That idea really sparked an interest in John, and he found a ladder that he was going to climb up to the top. He knew he probably was not supposed to be doing this, but he didn't see any cops around, so he called it good. He was not satisfied with this roof though and wanted to go to the very tallest one. He was super glad he did this because at the top he got the best view possible of the town. He was discovering so many new things about this town that he never even once thought about doing. After not getting to play any dominoes in Saint Denis, he knew of a good spot here in Blackwater to play some. These guys were just outside of the town and were always playing. After a couple of rounds, John left the table. After that, he had a couple drinks at the saloon while waiting for night. Later that night in the saloon, John decided he wanted to play some blackjack. He didn't do so well though and lost his first round and his second, so he just left the table. After that, he called it good for the day and headed to bed in his nice hotel room. The next morning, John left his hotel. The general store was right across the street, so he decided to get some breakfast. He quickly noticed there was no shopkeeper, meaning he could take whatever he wanted for free. I know John tried to live a crime-free life now, but there were some things he couldn't help still, and to be completely honest, he went a little bit crazy. For the last leg of his trip, John decided to splurge on a stagecoach ride. Reflecting on Blackwater, John rated the hotel 7.5 out of 10. For things to do, he also rated it 7.5 out of 10. For the overall niceness town rating, he gave Blackwater 8.5 out of 10. It would have gotten higher, but there was a lot of construction going on. That brings the total to be 23.5 out of 30. The stagecoach had brought John to his first stop of the journey onto his last town. His stop did not start good as he noticed a bunch of bandits ride on their horses into town shooting their guns up. He knew he wasn't going to stay here long. Not to mention the second thing he saw was a dead lady on the ground rotting. See, Armadillo had a cholera outbreak, which is why he would not be staying here and it was merely just a stop. The man behind him at the bar immediately warned him to leave and also told him he had the disease. John took this as a cue to leave and keep going on his journey to the next town. The last leg of his journey once again involved horseback riding. John was very happy to get out of that disease-ridden town. His ride was super cool as he made his way through various canyons. And just like that, John was at his next town, Tumbleweed. Upon arriving in Tumbleweed, John first noticed a sheriff carrying a prisoner. Out of curiosity, he wanted to check out the situation. It sure seemed they didn't like the guy. Unlike the rest of the towns, John had no clue where to get his hotel, so he decided to hit the saloon first. He decided to order some chili to eat for his next meal. After asking around town, he ended up finding out the hotel was with the gun shop owner. His room was on the second floor of this building. After expecting way worse, he realized the room was not that bad at all. Heading back into town, he didn't really know what to do, so he headed to the butcher. He ended up buying some salted beef to eat. After finding nothing else in town, he decided decided to check out this mansion. Unfortunately, the door was locked. After that, he went to go talk with who he presumed was the owner. She was pretty nice to talk to. After heading back into town, John finally realized why this town was called Tumbleweed. There was about nothing to do here. John knew the one thing he could do was go have some drinks at the saloon. This was about as good as it gets in Tumbleweed. After his drinks, he went exploring around the saloon a little bit. He ended up stumbling on a poker room. He didn't feel like playing though. After that, he decided to call it a day and headed back to his hotel room, where he fell asleep for the night. John did not linger at all and was out of town right away in the morning. As John reflected on Tumbleweed, he realized the hotel was not that bad. He gave it a 5 out of 10. For things to do, this was honestly the worst one so far. It did have a saloon, but this was a solid 2.5 out of 10. The overall niceness town rating was 4 out of 10. To be honest, this was a pretty clean town, not that many abandoned buildings. Obviously a couple, but it was not bad. That brings the total for Tumbleweed at 11.5 out of 30. John's ride home was not short at all. On the way back, he thought about his least favorite town and favorite town. His overall favorite was clearly Saint Denis, where his least favorite was Van Horn. After a long ride, John was now back at his ranch. He was super excited to find his family and tell them all about his trip. Inside, he found Abigail first, then Jack and Uncle outside. He had a great trip, but he was happy to be home with his family. Next time, he for sure wanted to bring Jack. Strawberry was becoming one of John's favorite places to visit. Today, it was again another hub for one of his adventures. First, he checked into his hotel for the night. He was staying at the Welcome Center's room. At this point, he had stayed here many times, and by far, this was one of his favorite hotel rooms he's stayed at so far. First things first, John needed to change into a lighter, more breathable outfit. He decided to go with this outfit. Like usual, he always had to check out his amazing balcony view. He was hoping to go on a mini hike today, and then tomorrow hit the big hike he was waiting for. First though, he wanted to get something to eat. The best general store in town is right across from the hotel. He wasn't quite sure what he wanted to eat yet, so he decided to browse the catalog. He decided to buy some locally sourced salted beef, and also bought a simple bread roll. While eating his lunch, he wondered where he'd take his first mini hike. He wasn't quite sure what he'd do yet, but he also wanted to do something today still. He decided to go around and ask some people what they thought he should do. Some people had no good suggestions for him, but one guy just told him to follow the river down. He said it was a pretty cool route. John took his advice and decided this would be his first mini hike of the adventure. John started his hike following the river. He had no clue how long the river went or where it flowed to, but this trip was all about just winging it. John enjoyed walking down the riverside because compared to where he would be hiking tomorrow, this was a chill and easy hike. He found this pretty cool mini waterfall that he enjoyed watching. He wasn't quite sure how far to go and how close he was to the end of the river, but he just kept going for now. Some rapids started to develop in this area. There was no official trail down the river, so John had to make one himself. Eventually, he saw a bridge in the distance. He decided he'd go check it out, and then this would be his turnaround point. The bridge was pretty cool, and John decided to take a break to look over the edge. It was cool that the river went through like a canyon here. He checked out the other side after that and then decided to head back. Before he left though, he noticed a guy hogtied on the back of this horse. It wasn't his problem though, so he left him be. He didn't want to get too far from Strawberry, as he didn't want to get stranded out there at night with no lights or anything. He decided to run though, as he didn't want it to take forever to get back. He'd been really physically active lately with all his hiking, so this was no big deal to him. He eventually made his way back to town and found this cool cliff overlooking it. This part got him hyped up for tomorrow's hike. John headed back into town and decided to head back to his hotel room, where he decided to relax on his balcony for the rest of the night. He opted for an early bedtime today because he was going to need all the energy he could get for tomorrow's big hike, so he headed to sleep. The next morning, he immediately picked up some food from the general store and then immediately embarked to the starting point of the trail. The trailhead was a simple walk from Strawberry, which is why it was a perfect base to start at. The loop he was about to take was pretty famous by word of mouth. He'd been hearing about it for a while and always wanted to try it. Today was his day. He quickly approached the trailhead off the main road and officially started his big hike. He could just barely start to see what he'd be climbing in the future. John wasn't a huge fan of hiking. He preferred horseback riding, but he knew this one would be specifically worth it. The risk of bringing his horse on this trail was not worth it. He hoped he'd be more free to do what he would like without it. Very quickly, the trail was already starting to get a little bit crazier. This trail looped and made its way up and around Mount Shan. He made his way up to his very first of many switchbacks on this trail. He was really starting to gain some elevation here. The view off to the side of this trail was quickly becoming amazing as he came up on another switchback. This time much higher than the first, he decided to check over the edge. He was met with an amazing view. He couldn't believe he wasn't even up the whole mountain yet. How good was it going to be when he was at the top? He kept moving up the mountain, not wanting to waste too much time. So far, he was feeling great as well, not even a single bit tired. It visually looked like he was getting pretty close to the top now. And honestly, the trail was becoming really crazy. There was now a sheer cliff to his right. If he fell off, he was done for. Now felt like a great time to pull out the binoculars. Right away, John noticed his hometown, Blackwater. That was super cool to see from up here. John reminded himself to be safe for Abigail and Jack, so he left the cliffside and kept going. The trail kept winding super tight up the side of this mountain as he continued to make his way to the top. It really started to get cool around here. So far the hike was honestly pretty relaxing and fun for John. John then stumbled on a rock carving in the ground. He wrote about it in his notebook and then moved on. The view of the mountains on this part of the trail was insane. Once again, John decided to check out the sheer cliff right next to him. It was honestly a great adventure so far. On his very next switchback though, he noticed a dead body. That's right, he saw a human skeleton on the ground. He looked at it for a while, wondering what went wrong. He sure told himself he was not going to end up in the same situation though. He wouldn't lie, it did make him a little bit more nervous now though. He drew it in his notebook to remember what he saw and then called it good and kept going. John was now getting really close to what he presumed was the top. To be honest now too, he was definitely getting a little bit colder being at a higher elevation. Right up this part of the trail looked to be the top, and as he got up he realized the trail didn't go all the way to the very peak. Again though, he noticed a very deadly drop. He realized he was going to have to climb this peak himself. He wasn't going to come all the way up here just to not get to the top. His first attempt though did not go so well, as he realized it got pretty steep towards the top and he slid down. Thankfully, he didn't slide off the mountain. He gave it another shot. This time though, he made it almost all the way, but at the very end he slid down. That time was a lot closer, but he remained on the mountain. His third attempt, he tried getting some momentum from the bottom, but once again slid down. This was way harder than he thought it was going to be, but he was not going to leave without getting to the top. This attempt was by far his closest yet. He was about a step away from making it to the top. Thankfully, the slides down this rock didn't hurt that much. This time though, he almost fell off the deadly ledge. He definitely decided to play it more carefully after that last one, and it worked out because this time he actually made it to the top. After many attempts, he had finally made it, and it was 100% worth the effort. He looked all around him as he literally felt on top of the world, being on a mountain. He decided to get his binoculars out again, and he immediately noticed something cool. It looked like some sort of statue in the distance. He wasn't quite sure what it was, but he was gonna go check it out later. He saw a ranch far off in the distance as well. He tried to find Strawberry, but he couldn't quite locate it. After that, to descend off this peak, he decided to slide down. This was honestly pretty fun, but he had to be careful to not fall off the ledge. Walking on this part of the trail was so cool. Since he was on top of the mountain, there was a sheer cliff on both sides. He would head to go check out that mystery statue. This part of the trail was definitely his favorite, and just like that, he came up on the part that he would need to climb to get to the statue. Once again though, he realized it was very steep. He decided to look for a better approach at it, and he went for the opposite side. Still, it was steep though. Once again, adjusting where he started, he was actually able to make it up a little bit. The very last part though was the steepest, and it caused him to fall again. He thought he had enough momentum there, but he didn't. This time he decided to take it slow, but still, it was too steep. He was so close though. He went for one last attempt though, and this time pairing patience and momentum, he actually made it up the steep part. He had one last little wall to climb up, and then he was there. It was time to check out the cool statue. It was basically just a rock pillar sticking out of the ground with a bunch of other rocks surrounding it. He wondered what it meant or who made it. He would probably never know the answers to those questions, but it was still cool to look at and wonder. After taking one last look around it, he decided he had had enough and moved on. This time, instead of sliding, he made his way slowly down the mountainside. After a little stumble at the end, he was still safe. He ended up on the right trail as well. The loop was now making its descent down the mountain, which was good because he was starting to get cold up there. He still had a long ways to get back though, so his hike was far from over. Just the coolest part was done now. On his way down, John noticed a dinosaur bone. This was super cool and another thing he had to write in his notebook. He had so far found a lot of cool things on this mountain. As he continued on his hike, there was now no more snow, and nothing really cool was going on, so he started to pick up the pace a little bit. He did notice 2 horses in a wagon. They appeared to be just completely abandoned here. John didn't want the rest of the hike to take forever, so he started to run. John was now near the end of the trail as he saw the main road now. This was going to be the most boring part of the trip, walking all the way back to Strawberry. On his way back though, he decided to reflect on his adventure. First he arrived and got comfortable in Strawberry, then he got some food at the local general store. Then he asked some locals for a good mini hike. He ended up choosing going down the river. He followed down the river, found a mini waterfall, continued to look at rapids, eventually stopped at a bridge, saw a guy hogtied on the back of a horse, ran all the way back to Strawberry, where he then went to bed to get ready for tomorrow. He woke up early the next day, got breakfast, and immediately started heading to the trailhead. Starting off on an easy trail that slowly ramped up in difficulty. The view got better and better, the turns became sharper and sharper as he made his way up the mountain. He stumbled on the remains of a dead person, and only a little bit after that, he made it to the top. At the top, he needed to climb up to the very peak, going off the trail. He slid down many times, but after some persistence, he made it to the top. He got out his binoculars, looked around, he saw a cool statue in the distance. He slid down the peak he climbed up, and decided to walk to it. Once he got there, he realized he had to climb even more, slipped again a couple times, but eventually made it to the top. He admired the statue, and then decided it was time to keep going. He made it back to the main trail, found a dinosaur bone on the way back, and then made it to the main road on his way back to Strawberry, where he was now. Eventually, he came up on a sign telling him he was close to Strawberry, so he followed its directions. He continued his long run, and shortly after, he arrived back at the town of Strawberry. It all ended up being perfect timing as well, because the sun was starting to set. Today was a great day for John, and he was very happy he went on the hike.